At Travis Field, just outside the Nevada desert, the sun hit the tarmac like a hammer, and jets lined up in perfect rows like sleeping beasts. Every morning, while the other pilots filtered into the mess hall, loud and confident, Lieutenant Claire Bennett showed up 15 minutes early to the briefing room. Posture straight, hair tied back to regulation, uniform crisp. She was always on time, always prepared, and always overlooked. They called her the mascot. It started as a joke. On her second week at the base, someone found an old photo on her desk. Claire at 8 years old, dressed as a fighter pilot for Halloween, complete with goggles and a cardboard helmet. Captain Rick Dawson held it up, laughed, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look at our squadron mascot. Isn't she just adorable?" The name stuck. No one cared that Claire had graduated top of her flight school class, that her simulator scores were perfect, that she had more commendations than half the pilots at Travis. To them, she was the quiet one who fixed their errors during maintenance checks, the one who organized terrain maps no one bothered to study, the one they pushed off combat rosters and onto ground communications duty, again and again. They smiled at her like she was a decoration, someone to pose next to when the Pentagon sent photographers. She smiled back, said nothing, and kept working. But what no one saw, what no one bothered to ask, was what Claire did after hours. While the others drank beer and swapped stories in the officers' club, Claire slipped into the simulator room. Alone, night after night, she ran the same scenario: contested airspace, precision strike, heavy resistance, minimal fuel. She didn't just fly it, she lived it. Every ridge, every blind canyon, every radar installation mapped in her mind like the lines on her own hand. She'd done the run 53 times. Her best record beat the bases by 14 seconds. She told no one. On the day before the big evaluation for Operation Dust Storm, Claire's name wasn't even posted for the flight roster. Again, instead, she was assigned ground comms, monitoring transmissions from the control tower, in case something came up. It didn't matter that she knew the mission better than anyone else. Not when people like Captain Dawson still saw her as the girl from the Halloween photo. "Don't forget to smile for the congressman next week," one lieutenant sneered, tossing his helmet into a locker. "They love a good mascot." Claire said nothing. She never did. She spent lunch alone with 3 technical manuals and a map spread across her tray. She studied in silence while the room around her buzzed with laughter and swagger. To them, it was just another drill. To Claire, it was a battlefield, one she'd already walked in her mind 100 times. That night at 9:00 p.m., she returned to the simulator. No audience. No scoreboard. Just her and the controls. On her third run, she nailed the inverted dive, threading through enemy radar with a maneuver so tight it had never been attempted outside training. Mission complete. Success rating the 100%. Time, 16 minutes and 48 seconds. She allowed herself a small smile. Then she ran it again. At 11:30, she shut down the system and walked the perimeter of the base in silence. The stars above sharp against the desert sky. Back in her quarters, a tidy room with nothing out of place but one photo. Her grandmother in uniform beside a B-17 Flying Fortress. Claire opened her journal. Day 275. Still waiting. Grandpa used to say preparation meets opportunity. I'm ready. The next morning, the roster confirmed what she already knew: no combat assignment. Just more comms. Just more pretending she didn't know what she was capable of. Commander Hall Jensen, one of the few to notice her endless hours in the simulator, pulled her aside. "I put your name forward for the mission," he said. "Colonel Wright overruled me again. Politics. A's worried about perception if something happens to you." Claire looked him in the eye. "My time will come, sir. Until then, I'll serve wherever I'm needed." Jensen studied her a moment longer. "Your patience is extraordinary, Lieutenant. I'm not sure I could do the same." She gave a slight nod. "My grandmother waited 2 years before they let her fly. I can wait longer." He exhaled and handed her the maintenance sheet for Jet 4. "Report to Hangar C after the briefing. They need a systems check." And so she did. Quietly, efficiently, Claire went about her day. She adjusted a minor fuel pressure issue on the aircraft, something most would have missed, and completed her checklist. When the squadron took off for the simulation, she sat alone in the cockpit, just watching. Then the radar blinked. 3 unknown aircraft, no transponders, approaching fast from the northwest. This wasn't part of the drill. She radioed the tower, no response. Seconds later, the first missile struck. And the woman they all called the mascot was the only one left in a position to fight back. The morning sun hadn't even reached its full heat when Lieutenant Claire Bennett climbed into the cockpit of Jet 4, parked quietly in Hangar C. The plane no one expected to fly that day. Her orders were simple: a routine systems check, followed by a return to ground communications. Another day, another opportunity denied. She wasn't bitter. Not visibly. As always, she moved with precision. No wasted motion. Every switch tested, every reading logged. She worked with quiet devotion, surrounded by the smell of fuel and metal, her favorite kind of silence. To her, aircraft didn't judge. They responded to truth, not opinion. Halfway through her inspection, she caught something, a slight inconsistency in the fuel circulation system. Small, but if ignored, it could cause engine imbalance mid-flight. Claire adjusted it without comment. Another quiet fix no one would ever know about. Outside, the tarmac roared to life. The exercise squadron lined up on the main runway, 8 jets gleaming under the Nevada sky. Claire watched from the cockpit as one by one, they thundered into the air, disappearing in formation toward the designated training zone. She should have headed back to the communications trailer. That was her post. But something inside her told her to stay just a moment longer. She ran one more systems diagnostic. That's when she saw it. A flicker on the radar. At first, it looked like a glitch. 3 aircraft approaching from the northwest, no transponder signals. Flying low. But something felt wrong. Claire's instincts, sharp from thousands of simulator hours, screamed louder than the radar's gentle blip. She keyed the radio. Control tower, this is Lieutenant Bennett in Hangar C. I'm seeing 3 unidentified aircraft approaching bearing 315, low altitude. Please confirm. Static. She switched frequencies. Control tower, come in. Unknown aircraft inbound. Request confirmation. Still nothing, just dead air. The line, like the warning signs on the radar, was silent. She scanned the base through the canopy. Ground crews moved normally. Mechanics worked on parked jets. Administrative staff walked between buildings, coffee in hand. To the untrained eye, it was just another morning. But then she saw it, a black speck on the horizon, moving fast, too fast. Wrong shape, wrong angle, her breath caught. That's not one of ours. The explosion came first, a blinding white flash. Then the deep, gut-shaking boom as the communications tower vanished into smoke and debris. The shockwave rattled her cockpit. Alarms screamed across the base. Claire's fingers flew to the controls out of pure instinct. The radar, once quiet, now lit up in chaos. 3 unknown aircraft had become 4, circling for another pass. And still the base defenses remained silent. They'd been targeted first. Down on the ground, everything disintegrated into panic. Mechanics dropped tools. Personnel sprinted for bunkers. Another missile hit the main hangar, sending fireball debris into the sky. Flames and black smoke devoured the heart of Travis Field. Claire didn't move. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She ran the numbers. Jet 4 was fueled, systems green. Positioned at the far edge of the base, on an old auxiliary strip no longer part of the active deployment roster. No one thought to destroy it. No one thought she'd be the one sitting in it. The irony was sharp. The one jet that could fly was under the control of the pilot no one let fly. Her hands moved on their own. Startup sequence engaged. Engines roaring to life. Outside, a stunned young technician ran toward her ladder, staring in disbelief. She motioned, remove the wheel blocks. He hesitated. She pointed again, sharp and clear. Training overtook confusion. He obeyed. Claire throttled forward, wheels rolling slowly toward the only piece of pavement not reduced to rubble. Just then, the radio crackled to life. This is Captain Dawson. Our squadron's returning from exercise. What the hell is happening down there? A scrambled voice replied from a backup emergency channel. Base is under attack. Do not approach. Main runway destroyed. Defense grid offline. Panic followed. We're low on fuel. We need landing options, now. Claire grabbed the radio. This is Lieutenant Bennett. I'm airborne in 60 seconds. Recommend diverting to Hill AFB bearing 157, approximately 112 miles. Maintain optimal cruise to stretch fuel. There was a pause, a long one. Bennett? What the hell are you doing in a jet? She didn't flinch. My job, sir. Another explosion shook the tarmac. This time it hit the fuel depot. Claire's vision blurred momentarily from the heat wave, but she kept her hand steady. Then came a voice she didn't expect. "Commander Jensen. Bennett. Hold position." "That's an order." Her hand hovered over the radio. She had never disobeyed a command in her life. Not once. Then she saw Jensen, running toward her jet, dodging fire, waving something above his head. A map. He reached the ladder. She popped the canopy. 4 bogies. Stealth config. Likely Su-57s. He shouted over the engine roar. "Advanced systems. They've disabled radar, comms, and defense. This is the last frequency we have." He jabbed his finger at a frequency scrawled in the corner. His face was streaked with soot, a cut bleeding down his cheek. For once, no rank, no protocol. Just truth. "You're all we've got, Lieutenant," he said. "Show them what our mascot can do." Then he stepped back and saluted. A real salute. For the first time in 275 days, someone believed. Claire nodded, no words, no bravado. Just the weight of a decision that would echo for the rest of her life. She secured the canopy, switched frequencies, keyed her mic. "All Travis personnel, this is Lieutenant Bennett. I'm wheels up in 60 seconds to engage enemy aircraft. I'll hold the perimeter until help arrives." Throttle open. Jet 4 rolled down the auxiliary strip, smoke billowing around her. Through it, she could see personnel stopping to watch, shielding their eyes, uncertain of what they were seeing. A mascot? No, not anymore. As the wheels left the ground and she soared through the chaos, Claire Bennett wasn't just a pilot anymore. She was the last line of defense, and she was ready. The auxiliary runway was little more than a strip of aging concrete, half forgotten and barely maintained. But to Lieutenant Claire Bennett, staring down its length through the haze of smoke and destruction, it looked like the only road that mattered in the world. Jet 4, her Jet 4, sat primed and ready, engines humming, systems green. Behind her, the main runway was a cratered mess, torn apart by missile strikes. Flames roared from the hangars. The control tower was gone. Most of the base was in chaos. Radios were down, the defense grid fried, and enemy aircraft were circling again for another run. There were no senior pilots left, no chain of command to defer to, no checklist for what to do when the world catches fire, and you're the only one still standing on the launch pad. Just one jet, and one pilot. Commander Hall Jensen had seen it too. That's why, seconds earlier, he'd risked his life to reach her. He didn't bring orders. He brought a paper map, scrawled with enemy coordinates, radar frequencies. A final directive born not from protocol, but from desperation. "You're all we've got, Lieutenant," he had said, eyes sharp even through the soot and blood. "Show them what our mascot can do." Then he stepped back and saluted. Claire had returned it, sharp, crisp, and full of meaning. For 275 days she had been ignored, doubted, laughed at. But in that moment, she wasn't the joke anymore. She was the plan. She secured the canopy, checked her straps, ran through the launch sequence from memory, fingers steady even as explosions echoed around her. "All Travis personnel." She transmitted across the last working frequency. "This is Lieutenant Bennett. I'm airborne in 60 seconds. Engaging enemy aircraft. We'll hold the perimeter until reinforcements arrive." On the ground, emergency teams paused. Ground crew turned and stared, half hidden behind burning equipment. Someone pointed. Another dropped his wrench. They weren't sure what they were seeing. The mascot. In the cockpit. Yes, and she was rolling. Jet 4 crept forward, wheels bumping over a seam in the concrete. Claire gave the throttle a gentle push. The engines responded with a roar that swallowed the sirens and screams around her. 30 knots, 50, 80. The wind pressed against the canopy. Her fingers tightened around the stick. Smoke blew across the runway, but she stayed locked in. Her boots braced, the engines reached full power. Then, rotation. The nose lifted. The wheels left the ground. She was airborne. For the first time since graduating flight school, Claire Bennett was no longer practicing, no longer simulating, no longer waiting for a chance to prove herself. This was it, the real thing. She climbed hard, banking into the open desert sky, weaving between plumes of smoke and debris. Below her, Travis Field looked like a war zone, because it was one. She leveled out at 3,000 feet. Her radar display flared. 4 enemy aircraft, stealth configuration, likely Su-57s as Jensen had warned. Advanced fighters with high maneuverability, long-range missiles, and cutting-edge jamming tech. And now they were regrouping for a second strike. Claire keyed the make. Base. This is Bennett. Visual confirmation on 4 hostiles. Engaging now to divert from base perimeter. No response. Just static. She was alone. They noticed her almost immediately. One broke formation to investigate. Then another. Standard procedure when an unexpected threat appears. Flush it out, flank it, eliminate it. But Claire didn't give them the chance. She dove straight in. The maneuver was deliberate, bold, reckless to anyone else. But she knew exactly what she was doing. Her target, the lead aircraft. Missile lock in progress. She squeezed the trigger. The first missile missed. The enemy pilot rolled out in a clean, evasive pattern. A professional, good. That meant they'd underestimate her. Assume she was just lucky to be airborne. They had no idea. She banked left, fast and tight, drawing them away from Travis and toward the foothills northeast of the base. Miles of rugged, treacherous terrain. She'd flown this region 100 times in the simulator. Now it was real. Her pursuers followed. Claire dropped altitude rapidly, hugging the ridgeline so close she could almost feel the heat rising from the rock. 2 enemy fighters followed her into the narrow gorge. Devil's Spine, they called it, a canyon only the simulator veterans even talked about. The other 2 climbed, waiting to intercept her on the far side. She knew that too. This was all going exactly as she had planned. Only now, it wasn't practice. One mistake, one miscalculation, and she'd be nothing more than a plume of fire between canyon walls. But Claire didn't make mistakes. She studied, she trained, and she waited 275 days for this. Back at base, what remained of the personnel huddled around emergency radios. Captain Dawson, still en route with his depleted squadron, listened in silence. For the first time in his career, he realized someone had been training for this moment while he was laughing at the bar. Commander Jensen spoke into the mic. She's leading them through Devil's Spine. That's suicide. Dawson muttered. She's done it 53 times. Jensen replied. Perfect score every time. In the skies over Nevada, Claire Bennett was no longer the mascot. She was the only shield the base had left, and her war had just begun. Lieutenant Claire Bennett had never flown in combat, but as Jet 4 pierced the smoke, filled Nevada's sky, she wasn't thinking about that. She was thinking about wind vectors, terrain ridgelines, and enemy flight patterns. The 4 Su-57s had already seen her. She could tell from the way their formation shifted, tightening, scanning. One peeled off to intercept, then another. They didn't expect a threat to come from the direction of Travis Field. They believed their work was nearly done. That mistake would cost them. Claire locked onto the lead aircraft, thumb hovering over the trigger, missile lock engaged. She fired. Too early, the enemy rolled hard left expertly, her missile streaking harmlessly past. These weren't green pilots, they were trained, lethal, and flying some of the most advanced stealth jets in the world. Claire wasn't surprised. She wasn't even rattled. She was exactly where she'd planned to be. With a snap of the stick, she dove toward the east, toward the canyon known on the simulator as Route 7, but by the few pilots who had ever attempted it in training, as Devil's Corridor. It was a stretch of winding rock, barely 160 feet across in places and treacherously narrow. Most regarded it as suicide for high-speed combat flying. But Claire, she had memorized every bend, every dip, every outcropping. In the simulator, she had flown it 67 times. Perfect score. Every time, the enemy took the bait, 2 jets followed her into the canyon. The other 2 stayed above, trying to anticipate her exit and cut her off. It was smart by the book. But Claire didn't fly by the book. She flew by feel, and she knew this canyon better than they ever could. Jet 4 hugged the riverbed, roaring barely 50 feet above the water. Claire's breath slowed. Every movement became instinct. Her eyes tracked shadows on the canyon wall, gouging distance with an awareness honed through hundreds of lonely nights at the simulator. Behind her, the enemy jets struggled. One misjudged a turn, clipped the rock face. A fireball lit up the canyon wall, 3 left. Claire didn't look back. She was already rising, straight up, pulling a vertical climb so sharp it would have ripped the wings off an unprepared aircraft. But she was ready. She had always been ready. Just as she crested the canyon rim, she rolled her jet 180 degrees into an inverted dive. Beneath her, one of the pursuing Su-57 shot forward, expecting her to continue down the canyon. He was exposed. Predictable. She fired. Direct hit. Two left alarms screamed in her cockpit. The remaining enemy jets had locked onto her position, missiles inbound. Claire dumped countermeasures and dove hard. Back into the canyon. Flare trails lit up behind her like fireworks in the morning sun. One missile detonated prematurely. Another skidded wide, confused by the heat signatures and tight rock formations. Her jet shook but held, still flying. She turned sharply left then right again, carving between canyon walls with the kind of precision that only comes from painstaking repetition. Below her, the Colorado River cut through the stone like a ribbon of steel. The two remaining Su-57s split up. One dove after her. The other climbed again, trying to anticipate her escape. That was the moment Claire made her choice. She pulled into a vertical climb again, but this time at reduced power. It was a feint, a trap. The pursuing Su-57 surged upward to follow her. Then, with a move so abrupt it defied physics, she cut her engines and deployed air brakes mid-ascent. The enemy overshot her by a heartbeat. It was all she needed. She slammed the throttle forward, gained lock, and launched her third missile. One left. The final Su-57 didn't hesitate. He dove toward her with guns blazing. No more stealth, no more distance. Just rage and fire. Tracer rounds zipped past her canopy. A few struck home, ripping into her left wing. Warning lights blazed on her console. She'd lost partial hydraulics. Maneuverability was compromised. She couldn't win a turning fight now, so she wouldn't. Instead, she banked hard toward the canyon's most dangerous stretch. A natural rock arch just wide enough for one jet to pass through sideways. Claire lined it up. As the last enemy jet screamed after her, she rolled her aircraft 90 degrees, slipping through the stone arch like a thread through a needle. Her wingtip missed the rock by less than 3 feet. The enemy wasn't so lucky. His angle was off. His speed was too high. He tried to correct. Too late. The Su-57 struck the canyon wall at full speed, an explosion that shook the valley. And just like that, they were gone. Claire steadied her jet, systems failing, fuel low. But she was still airborne, still alive. Back at Travis Field, wounded personnel gathered around backup radios. The only voice they heard now was Claire's, calm, controlled. "Base, this is Bennett. All hostiles neutralized, jet damaged but flyable. Request emergency landing clearance." The base erupted in cheers. Even Captain Dawson, now safe at a nearby airfield, closed his eyes and whispered, "She did it." And for the first time, no one called her the mascot. They called her what she always was, a fighter pilot. Lieutenant Claire Bennett was running on instinct, adrenaline, and muscle memory. Jet 4 rattled beneath her, the left wing shredded and hydraulics barely holding together. Her control panel lit up like a Christmas tree, warnings flashing red across every system. She had one mission left: get home. Below her, Travis Field looked like a scar in the desert. Black smoke rose from the wreckage of the hangars and the fuel depot. Pieces of the base she had walked every day, now craters, rubble, silence, except the runway. The auxiliary strip, damaged, cracked, but still usable, was waiting for her. And so were they. Claire squinted through the canopy. Down below, figures lined the emergency strip, dozens of them. Maintenance crews, medics, comms techs, administrative staff. Even a few pilots who hadn't deployed that morning. All of them standing along the edges of the cleared path, eyes fixed on the horizon waiting. For her, the radio crackled to life. "Lieutenant Bennett," came Commander Jensen's voice, steady but unmistakably reverent. "Runway's clear. Emergency crews are standing by. Bring her home." She gave no reply. Her hands were too busy fighting the controls. The damaged hydraulics resisted every correction. The left wing wanted to dip. She kept it level with subtle pressure on the stick, counterbalanced by adjusting the throttle by feel alone. 500 feet. Gear down. Flaps set. She came in low and fast, wind buffeting the wounded airframe. She had one shot, no second attempt. No backup. At precisely the right moment she flared. The wheels hit the pavement hard. The jet bounced once, screamed in protest, then caught the strip and held. The brakes hissed. The aircraft shuddered. She kept it straight. Jet 4 rolled to a stop at the far end of the runway, smoke curling from the landing gear. The fire crews rushed forward with hoses ready. But there was no fire, no explosion. Just silence. Then the canopy popped open, and Claire sat motionless, helmet still on, both hands gripping the controls like she wasn't quite sure it was over. When she finally removed her helmet, the desert heat rushed in. So did the smell, smoke, scorched metal, and jet fuel. But also something else. Respect. Claire climbed down the ladder slowly. Her knees trembled, but she stayed upright. Every eye on the base was on her now. Not because they were laughing. Not because she was a novelty. Because they had just witnessed something none of them could deny. Commander Jensen approached first. His uniform was torn. His face still smudged with soot and blood. But he stood tall. "Lieutenant Bennett," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Then, breaking protocol, he extended his hand. "That," he said, "was the finest flying I've ever witnessed." Claire shook it, still catching her breath. She didn't know what to say. She had never been the center of attention on this base, except as a punchline. Then she heard another voice. "Lieutenant." She turned. It was Captain Rick Dawson. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't smug. His flight suit was wrinkled from the emergency transport, and his helmet was under his arm. But his posture was military perfect, and his eyes were different now. He snapped to attention and saluted her. A long, steady, sincere salute. "I owe you my life," he said. "We all do." It was the first real acknowledgement he had ever given her, and then the others followed. One by one, the line of personnel began to salute. Mechanics, admins, officers who once rolled their eyes when she spoke, pilots who once ignored her presence entirely, even those who didn't know her name. Claire stood straighter. She returned each salute with precision, her hand firm and steady. The gesture meant more than any medal ever could, not because it was loud, but because it was earned. Later, as the emergency crews examined the damage to Jet 4, Jensen gave her the full report. Preliminary assessment: 6 injuries, all minor. No fatalities. "You gave us just enough time to hit the bunkers." Claire nodded. Quietly, "They were Su-57s, she said. Advanced stealth systems. Coordinated strike. They knew exactly where to hit." Jensen's expression hardened. "Initial intel says they weren't part of any nation's military. A non-state actor. Possibly mercenaries, funded, trained, and equipped with high-end tech." "Why Travis?" she asked. "Because we're the forward line," he said. "We were. Until you changed the game." That night, Claire didn't return to her quarters right away. She sat alone beside the flight line, staring at what remained of the base she had fought to protect. Around her, recovery teams worked through the rubble. Jets burned in the distance. But the auxiliary strip, the one no one cared about until today, was quiet. She looked up at the stars, and for the first time in 275 days, she felt like she belonged, not because someone told her, but because she proved it. The adrenaline had long since faded. The smoke still lingered, but the battle was over, and Lieutenant Claire Bennett was finally allowed to breathe. For the first time in nearly a year, she sat not in silence, but in a room full of men and women who now leaned in when she spoke. It was the debriefing. A converted storage unit had become the new command center, with folding chairs, backup monitors, and satellite uplinks humming with static. Intelligence officers from out of state had flown in within hours. Not to meet the squadron, they came for her. She was the only one who had seen the enemy, the only one who had survived combat, the only one who had fought and won. Claire sat at the center of the room, still in her flight suit, dirt smudged and torn at the seams. Her hair was pulled back in the same no-nonsense bun as always. But the eyes watching her now weren't dismissive. They were hungry for answers. "How did you identify the aircraft so quickly?" one senior analyst asked. "Their vector pattern matched known Su-57 formations," she answered calmly, "and their stealth signatures were nearly identical to Russian origin models, but with modified thermal output." She didn't guess. She knew. Another officer leaned in. "You engaged 4 simultaneously. Alone. How'd you survive?" "I diverted them into a canyon system. Used the terrain to break their line of sight advantages. Forced them into tight quarters where their range advantage didn't matter." "Did you train for that scenario?" A pause. Then Claire said it. Simply, honestly. "Yes. 67 times." The room went quiet. It was Colonel Whitmore, head of deployment, the man who had repeatedly removed her name from combat rosters, who finally broke the silence. 67 times. "In simulation," Claire said, voice steady. "Over the last 11 months. alongside over 2,000 hours of personal flight simulator time. Whitmore blinked. 2,000? That's more than most active pilots log in 4 years, someone muttered under their breath. Claire gave a small nod. Yes, sir. For a long moment, the air was thick with realization. Chairs creaked. Pens stopped scribbling. It wasn't just what she had done in the sky. It was the truth that every hour, every late night, every missed social event, every moment she spent in that empty simulator room had led to this. The room she had cleaned herself. The lights she had flipped on in the dark. The silence that had once made her feel invisible was now evidence. Whitmore shifted in his seat, then stood. He didn't look at anyone else, just at Claire. Lieutenant, he said, voice quieter than usual, I believe I owe you an apology. Claire remained seated, professional, respectful. You were right, he added, jaw tight. I dismissed you. I let perception overrule performance. I let politics get in the way of potential. Another pause. I intend to correct that. Commander Jensen, who had been standing silently near the back of the room, gave the faintest nod. His face betrayed no emotion, but his eyes said everything. He had fought for her, and now the room knew why. Effective immediately. Whitmore continued, your status will be changed to active combat pilot. You will also assist in redesigning simulator training protocols for high-risk terrain operations. I believe your expertise will be invaluable. Claire stood at attention. Understood, sir. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. But for the first time since her arrival at Travis Field, her words weren't met with silence or snickers. They were met with respect. Later that evening, as the base settled into its strange new normal, smoke still curling from wreckage, construction crews staking out repairs, Claire returned to her quarters. Her journal was waiting on the desk. She opened it to the last entry, day 275. Still waiting. She added beneath it day 276. They asked me how I survived. I told them the truth. I never stopped preparing. Even when no one asked me to. Even when no one believed I ever would. She closed the book, filed it in her drawer, and stood a little taller. The next morning, a new pilot arrived at Travis, fresh from the academy. Lieutenant Sarah Monroe. She was young, bright-eyed, quiet. The kind of presence that, not long ago, might have been overlooked entirely. Claire watched her from across the flight line, and she remembered what that felt like. But that chapter, being invisible, was over. Now it was time to lead. 1 week later, the sun rose over Travis Field the way it always had, burning through morning haze, lighting up the distant hills in gold. But the base itself had changed. The hangars were still under repair. Debris still lined the southern perimeter. Scorched tire marks from emergency landings hadn't yet been scrubbed from the auxiliary strip. But there was something new in the air now. Something even stronger than the smell of jet fuel. Respect. Personnel stood straighter. Pilots double-checked their flight logs. Technicians stopped to greet the quiet woman in the regulation flight suit walking across the tarmac. Lieutenant Claire Bennett wasn't just another name on a schedule anymore. She was Captain Bennett now, promoted by direct order from Central Command, assigned to lead Phoenix Squadron, a newly formed tactical strike unit focused on high-risk engagements, rapid response missions, and advanced terrain warfare. The kind of operations that, a month ago, no one would have trusted her to observe, let alone command. And now she was at the front of the room, briefing the very pilots who used to mock her. Good morning, she began, standing beside a large topographical map spread across a folding table. Today we begin our evaluation flights through Canyon Route 7. Some of you know it as Devil's Corridor. There was a rustle among the group. Captain Rick Dawson, once her harshest critic, raised a hand. Mom, that route's never been cleared for live exercises. It narrows to less than 50 meters in 3 spots. Claire met his gaze. Comdirect, I'm aware, Captain Dawson. I've flown it in simulation 67 times, and once in combat. You'll fly it with full safety support and a chase jet. I'll be evaluating your lines personally. There were no smirks this time, no muttered jokes. Just quiet pencils scribbling down notes. In the days that followed, Phoenix Squadron took shape. Claire's leadership wasn't loud. She didn't bark orders or demand attention. She didn't need to. She knew more than anyone in that room, and they all knew it now. Pilots who once rolled their eyes at her attention to detail now followed her lead with diligence. She introduced new protocols, adjusted simulator parameters, and implemented post-flight debriefs that focused on terrain awareness, split-second maneuvering, and low-visibility combat logic. And no one argued, because they remembered. They remembered that it wasn't the Top Guns who saved the base. It was the quiet woman in the corner of the simulator room. At the end of her first week as squadron leader, Claire arrived at the briefing room early, as always. She didn't expect anything special. Routine was its own reward. But as she entered, she paused. On the side of Jet 4, now fully repaired, was a new emblem, freshly painted, still drying under the morning sun. A stylized phoenix, wings outstretched, rising from flames. Below it, in careful lettering, Mascot Squadron. She stared at it for a moment and smiled. They had taken the insult once thrown at her and turned it into a badge of honor, a symbol of rebirth, of proving everyone wrong. That afternoon, a new recruit reported for duty. Lieutenant Sarah Monroe recently graduated from the academy. She was quiet, precise, a little withdrawn, reminded Claire of herself on day one. Monroe stood just outside the hangar, clutching her flight log, unsure where to go. Claire approached and offered a nod. "Lieutenant Monroe, walk with me." Monroe's eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am." As they crossed the tarmac, Claire spoke without formality. "I reviewed your simulator files. 300 hours logged. Not bad. Starting tonight, I'll upload you to my personal training bank. It's a little more demanding than what you're used to." Monroe nodded quickly. "I'll put in the hours, Captain." Claire stopped walking, looked her square in the eye. "Good. But remember this, no matter how hard you train, someone will always try to define your worth by something other than your ability. Your gender, your background, your silence." She gestured toward the base, toward the scorched remains in the rebuilt hangars and the painted jet now bearing the Phoenix. "When the moment comes, none of that will matter. Only what you've prepared for will." "Yes, ma'am." Later, as Claire stood in the control tower watching her pilots prep for takeoff, she took a moment. She wasn't just flying anymore, she was leading, not with volume, not with ego, but with example. And from the ashes of doubt, she had built something new, something that would outlast even her time at the base. A legacy. Sometimes, the loudest people in the room aren't the strongest. Sometimes, the most decorated uniforms aren't the most prepared. And sometimes the one they laugh at in silence is the one who's quietly saving their lives. Captain Claire Bennett was called a mascot, not because she lacked skill, not because she didn't earn her place, but because the people around her were too proud to look deeper. And yet, she didn't fight back with words. She fought back with preparation, patience, and discipline. While they drank at the officers' club, she was in the simulator. While they mocked, she memorized terrain. While they doubted, she sharpened her instincts, alone. And when the sky lit up with fire, when the alarms sounded and everything fell apart, when every other jet was either gone or grounded on, she was the one who flew. She was the one who defended them all. Not because she was given permission, but because she was ready. You don't need applause to be valuable. You don't need recognition to be right. You don't need approval to be ready. What you need is to believe in the quiet work, the lonely hours, the unseen preparation. Because one day, maybe when it matters most, that quiet work will become the loudest answer in the room. And if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you're just a mascot, remember you're not. You're the phoenix in the flames. You're the one they'll salute when the smoke clears. If this story touched you the way it touched us, please, hit the like button to help it reach others who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, stories of unsung courage, quiet strength, and second chances. And in the comments, tell us, have you ever been underestimated and proved everyone wrong? We read every single one. Because your voice matters here. This is Mascot Squadron, and you belong.